My science and math autobiography. Throughout both elementary school and high school, science and math were never my strongest suit. As Komarchka and McMahon discuss in the article on motivating students, I was definitely one of the students grumbling and moaning anytime the teacher brought up the dreaded words math or science. As a very visual and kinesthetic learner, I always preferred science to math, at least up until high school. In elementary school, I can remember having lots of opportunities to work hands-on with science materials, as well as participate in many workshops by scientists in the school, which was very beneficial for me and my learning style. I can also remember having many opportunities in science to work collaboratively in a small group to try and complete an experiment. It was at these times that I can remember being really invested in the content, as we had the chance to self-direct our learning for the time being. As for math, I can't really think of a time when the teacher explicitly tried to tailor a lesson to meet the needs of students who were not logical, mathematic thinkers. Since I went to a French immersion elementary school, it wasn't until grade 7 that we made the transition to learning math and science and English. In grade 8, I had a teacher that really scared us into thinking that grade 9 math was going to be impossible if we couldn't get a solid grip on the concepts being taught in grade 8. While I remember really buckling down and pulling up my socks in grade 8, I also remember that our teacher really tried to make math fun and always went beyond a textbook and chalkboard type of lesson. I will never forget the bed math song we created to the tune of Jingle Bells to help us remember the order of operations. It wasn't until grade 8 that my attitude towards math really shifted. Although it still didn't always come easy to me, it was something I didn't mind working towards. Going into grade 9, I felt confident going into math because of my success in grade 8, but quickly learned that high school moves at a much faster pace, and I realized I wasn't going to be as successful as I thought I was going to be. Once I realized I was on a sinking ship, I got a tutor who I visited once a week. I kept the same tutor all throughout high school and can confidently say that math got progressively better for me over the years. Grade 11 was by far my best year due to the nature of the content and the teaching. I really excelled in grade 11 math to the point that I actually felt like a leader among my peers. Not only was I successful in my own work, but I also had the capacity to help and explain concepts to others. Although it became optional, I chose to continue math in my final year and I took a data management course. This was math in a whole new light for me as it was very hands-on and visual. I also found this math to be very applicable to the world around me, which was also very motivating. Overall, I think it is safe to say that although math was something I always had to work towards, it was a subject nonetheless that I really grew to enjoy. Academically speaking, I love the thrill of the challenge and the feeling of accomplishment after successfully mastering a difficult problem. As far as science goes, I had the same teacher for both grade 9 math and science. I wish I could call this a privilege, but she was the most boring, monotone, straight from the textbook kind of teacher I'd ever had. Unfortunately, because of the two science teachers I had in high school, science was ruined for me. I remember as a child always seeing the fancy labs and equipment in movies and was so excited to have the opportunity to do experiments in a real lab when I got to high school. But both my years in high school science, I can probably count on my two hands how many times I actually got to go in the lab. So science quickly became a period to socialize rather than to learn. Ultimately, I think that my absence of motivating and exciting teachers really stunted my interest in science and steered me away from continuing in the subject. After reflecting on my own experiences with both math and science in elementary school and high school, it is evident that my experience was really dependent on the teacher. I think I speak for many when I say that the teacher really has the ability to make or break a course for the student. As Marianne Small presents in her article, Making Math Meaningful, it is actually proven that our emotions and cognition are intertwined. This has huge implications as a teacher because if your students are going into math or science with a negative attitude, you are already denying them of their full potential. As a future teacher, it is therefore critical that I do two things. First is to address the various learning styles in my classroom, and second is to make math and science fun and relatable for my students. If that means pulling out manipulatives for every lesson, so be it. While manipulatives are increasingly important for the visual learner, Small also argues that using manipulatives further encourages cooperation, the opportunity to verbalize their problem-solving skills, as well as grants the students autonomy to work without teacher guidance. This is also where I think I could adopt some aspects of the Japanese model. The Japanese model is heavily based on self-directed learning, which is beneficial to the student, but also allows the teacher to steer the lesson in the direction of the student's needs accordingly. Secondly, I would argue that making the content relatable is key. I know as a student I can still hear myself saying, "When will I ever use this in real life?" As a teacher, I know I will be successful and my students will be able to make connections between a scientific or mathematical concept and the real world. While getting your students to understand is half of the battle, first you need to get them hooked. Pulling from the article on discrepant events, I believe that regardless of the subject, every class needs to begin with a good hook. This will ensure students are on task as well as allow the students to get their creative juices flowing before diving into content. While it is evident that I do not necessarily have the most positive experience with math and science due to some of my teachers, I can still be thankful for what they have shown me not to do. So whether you're math's biggest fan or not, you need to remember it is part of the package when you become a primary junior teacher. So why not embrace the challenge with a positive attitude in hopes that your students will reciprocate and continue to be lifelong learners?